Mika is finally here, and in this video, I'm going to give you an honest showcase of what you can expect from Constellation Zero Mika, as well as show you his full potential if you decide to unlock his constellations. I'm not sure if I'm the only one here, but I feel like Mika got introduced into the game out of the blue, and he kind of feels out of place. Which is ironic because his entire design and kit is focused around basically an abandoned mechanic, since Hoiverse hasn't really provided that many ways to play with physical units. And the thing is, Mika at C0 isn't actually a great physical support in quite a few situations. But let me explain things from the start so that you can get a clear idea of what this guy is able to do. And before I start this showcase, my Mika is C0 equipped with Noblesse Forset and Favonius Lance, and his talents are raised to level 9. So, first of all, his elemental skill when activated will deal almost non-existent damage. You can boost it all you want, but you can only go so far with these lackluster multipliers. However, what this skill will do is provide up to 25% attack speed or 21% at level 9. This buff called Soul Wind will last 12 seconds, and any active character will gain this attack speed boost. For Eula, this buff roughly translates to 1 extra Lightfall sword stack, but because her Claymore animations are so sluggish, even with this big attack speed boost, it's mostly just granting her convenience to land her standard combo with some ease when trying to build up her burst stacks. For physical Zhongli, if he spams his N5 6 times, a side-by-side comparison shows that he can finish the 6th time about a second sooner, just when the Soul Wind expires. And for someone like Ayato, this attack speed boost allows him to do 2 more slashes than usual. Overall, this attack speed boost isn't super impressive, and it's more like having fun with fast animations. But damage-wise, there's not that much increase, maybe aside from the fact you can obtain 1 extra Lightfall stack for Eula if your timing is perfect, or have a better ping than I did on this media server. Now, when it comes to Mika's burst, our guy seems to be a pacifist, because it doesn't deal damage, and instead it will first initially heal the whole team, and while the multiplier is a bit lower than Barbara's, he will grant another buff called Eagle Plume, and for 15 seconds, whenever an active character lands their normal attack on an enemy, they will get healed, but there is a 2.5 second interval cooldown. Basically, there's one big initial heal for the whole team, and then up to 5 times you can heal the active character when they land their normal attacks. Now, the healing itself is pretty decent if I have to be honest. With a fully dedicated Clam Forset and Black Tassel, as well as HP, and healing bonus main stats, his initial burst heals for around 18,000. And then from normal hits, active characters will heal for 3,686 or a total of 18,400 health or so. Now, the Clam Set's bubble will pop for a pretty good amount of damage, but this will only happen after the big initial heal, and afterwards, the healing from normal attacks are slow and average, so I wouldn't recommend using Clam Forset unless you're fine with these results. However, if we go back to his Noblesse Forset and Favonius Lance, with the main stats of HP, and critical rate to proc Favonius consistently, the initial heal is around 10,400, and normal hits heal for about 2080, or a total of about 10,400. So basically, if you go with a full healing set, he can heal for about 78% better than without a dedicated healer artifacts and weapon. But I feel like getting 10k heal for the whole team and 10k more is pretty decent, since in exchange, you're also going to generate Favonius particles and provide Noblesse buff for the team. Finally, let's talk about his main attraction. So the first passive talent will grant active characters Detector stacks. 1 stack is equal to 10% physical damage increase, and in order for Mika to obtain this stack, he needs to hit more than 1 enemy with his skill. Now, since his skill has 2 modes, tap and hold, if he taps after the first enemy who gets pierced, each additional one will grant 1 Detector stack. So if 3 enemies are lined up and you shoot them, Mika will obtain 2 Detector stacks. However, lining up enemies is pretty unnatural, so instead, if you hold down his skill button and release it, first he will hit 1 target, and then 3 shards will fire off at surrounding enemies, which means each one hit by this shard will grant 1 stack. Basically, if there are 4 enemies, you can obtain 3 Detector stacks. But you might be wondering, doesn't this mean Mika won't provide physical damage increase when going up against 1 single target? Well, luckily, here's where the second passive talent comes in. When Mika activates both his skill and burst, when an active character scores a critical hit with their attack, they will obtain 1 Detector stack, not 2, 3, or 4, just 1 for the whole duration, against a single target. I'm not sure about you, but I feel pretty disappointed by this. And to me, all of this stuff with detector stacks is a big convoluted mess because basically, to give you a dumbed down version, against a single target, Mika is only able to provide one detector stack after activating his skill and burst, but in an ideal situation, if you're going up against 4 enemies, then you can combine both these passive talents and obtain the max amount of 4 detector stacks, which is plus 40% physical damage increase. Overall, Mika's main utility, if you're using him against a single target, will be healing and attack speed boost while providing small physical damage increase. However, when going up against multiple enemies, then instead he will provide a pretty good physical damage boost as well. But let me show you what I mean in this next part. So let's talk about damage that Mika is able to boost with these detector stacks in the Abyss. Keep in mind, besides attack speed boost and healing, this is probably the biggest reason why you want to use him in your physical teams, because while his skill does consistently provide 4 elemental particles, which means along with Favonia's Lance he becomes a decent battery, it's still a 15-second cooldown, so you will only use him once in a rotation. Now, starting off with Eula, just doing her regular N4 combo against the enemies here, her burst explodes for almost 300,000 damage. Keep in mind, since these Eremites are humans, they have lower physical resistance than other enemies, so the numbers here will be slightly boosted. Now, by plugging in Mika before the burst, since there's 3 enemies here, with both Mika's passives, Eula will obtain 3 detector stacks, or extra 30% physical damage increase. This results in 352k explosion, which is pretty decent, but I definitely expected more. So what about Benny Boy if we use him here instead? Well, without too much surprise, Eula is able to score 456,000 damage with her burst, so this means Benny's boost allowed Eula to hit for 30% harder than with Mika. However, there is one thing I'm keeping from you here. Eula is using the new Bacon Claymore, which, while it does provide decent amount of critical rate, overall she ends up with pretty low attack, and Benny's burst is super efficient when boosting allies with low attack. So let's instead give Eula Wolf's Gravestone. With a lot more attack, when utilizing Mika's buffs, she will now score 432,000 damage, while with Benny Boy's burst, she can explode for 463,000 damage. Now, even though Benny came out on top here, it's not by much, just 7%. And keep in mind, he is C5 while Mika is C0. And also, if there was one more enemy that Mika's skill could land onto, Eula would gain one more additional 10% physical damage stack. But remember, when in single target situation, with just one detector stack, as you can imagine, Eula will hit for far less damage. So yeah, as you can see, if there's at least 3 enemies, Mika's physical damage boosting is pretty good at C0. And since I'm showcasing him in the Abyss, if you for example decide to pull on Shenhe's banner to obtain Mika, you can build a team like this mono-cryo physical team, as I like to call it, since Shenhe, Eula, and C6 Rosaria can shred enemies' physical resistance, while Mika can provide physical damage boost. Honestly, most of the teams will be centered around Eula with Mika, but if you do decide to use him with other physical damage dealers like Zhongli, or even make him the physical damage dealer, you can do it. But you'll need to carry the team with stuff like Hyperbloom damage if you want to clear the Abyss. But I think I beat around the bush long enough. It's pretty clear Hoyoverse made this character for whales, and just like with Farazan or Kujo-Sara, Mika's actual true potential gets unlocked when you get his final 6th constellation. Okay, so Mika's final constellation is pretty busted, but let's talk about the other ones first. C1 allows Mika's burst to heal more often when active characters hit with their normal attacks. Giving some more healing is always nice, since I feel like while the big initial heal is great, the normal attack heals are lackluster, and this constellation addresses it. But second constellation is where things get interesting. Now, when Mika hits with his skill, even if it's just one target, he will obtain 1 detector stack. So against a single target, you can now obtain 2 stacks in total in combination with his burst, and you only need 3 targets total to max out to 4 stacks. I would say this is the best stopping point if you ever decide to summon for his constellations. C3 and C5 increase his talents as usual. Both are pretty much meh. I don't think extra 3% attack or a bit more healing is what you will care about. However, the 4th constellation allows Mika to restore up to 15 energy to himself when active characters use normal attacks to heal themselves from his burst, and I think it's a nice way to lower his ER requirements for the Abyss. Still, the final 6th constellation is why we're here. So it first allows him to increase detector stacks by 1 more, and this means with 4 enemies, he can provide 50% physical damage boost. However, if it is a single target, it will still be 20% physical damage boost after using his skill and burst. Finally, active characters who are boosted by his skill will deal 60% more critical damage from physical attacks. So in total, C6 Mika can provide 25% attack speed boost, 50% physical damage increase, and plus 60% critical damage to physical attacks, assuming you're going up against 4 targets. Honestly, after activating all of these constellations on him, while it is nice to see some big silly white numbers on the screen, I still didn't feel as much of an impact as I did with C6 Farzan, and I think it mostly has to do with the fact physical damage isn't that amazing with all things considered. I mean, don't get me wrong, seeing Eula hit for a ton more damage with her burst is fun, but I was also able to clear the abyss with C0 Mika as well, although it was a struggle, so with C6 Mika it was by far easier to do it. I actually think the coolest thing about C6 Mika is messing around with other physical damage dealers other than Eula. Going back to good old Machine Gun Fischl, Crescent Pike Zhongli, Physical Keqing, or just using Mika himself is kind of funny with all things considered. So, what do I think about this young Favonius Knight? Well, as a healer, he is decent, but as a buffer, he is inconsistent at C0. I really hate the fact you can only obtain 10% physical damage increase against a single target, while it can be up to 40% against 4 targets. It just feels like giving him limits out of spite. I mean, sure, you get baited and you pull for his 2nd constellation. Now, against 1 enemy, you can have up to 20% physical damage increase, but come on. This damage type is already pretty bad. Not many teams can be built and used in the Abyss. Why not just let Mika carry the element? It's not like it would hurt to have a physical Benny Boy booster variant. With all things considered, I actually hope Mika to be the same as Goro, but instead, he is like Barbara, who can provide an inconsistent buff. In fact, Barbara has far more utility than him. You can use her in busted Dendro teams, and her Hydro application actually exists unlike Mika's, since you only get to shoot with him cryo once every 15 seconds, and that's it. Overall, I think C0 Mika is like a trial version of a program that's missing a lot of things, and by only getting C6 will you get to feel his impact on team builds. I really think this was a chance for Hoyoverse to make physical teams shine, but instead you need a ton of Primo Gems or luck to see some of that fun, and it's all locked behind the final constellation. But even then, I wouldn't recommend getting C6 unless you understand the limitations of physical damage in teams. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful. I really wanted to be honest with you here, and I hope you understand that Mika, or basically any character outside the Abyss, is perfectly fine unit to use. I personally think he has really cool and unique normal attack animations, and I think I will be building some wacky teams with him for world exploration, and maybe even for the Abyss. But regardless, as long as you have the right expectations set for Mika, no one's holding you back from pulling for him, and if you are, good luck to you, and thanks for watching my video.